Filthy stray. You belong behind bars, not on these steps. The words cut through the gray Manhattan morning like broken glass. Officer Anthony Russo, stocky and sunburned from too many sidewalk patrols, stood guard at the entrance of the Metropolitan Justice Complex. He planted himself on the marble steps as if guarding a fortress. The woman he blocked didn't slow down. Amara Lewis, mid-50s, moved with the calm precision of someone who lived by schedules. A leather briefcase hung from her hand. Her coat collar was neatly folded despite the drizzle. "Excuse me," she said evenly. "I'm heading inside." Russo smirked. "Inside where? This entrance is restricted. Show ID." She reached into her coat's slow, deliberate butt. Before her fingers brushed her wallet, his palm cracked across her face. The sound echoed off the courthouse pillars. The briefcase slipped, scattering neatly clipped legal files down the stairs. White paper fluttered against the wet concrete like startled pigeons. "Step back!" Russo barked, already convinced of his own version. He caught her wrist, twisted her around, and slammed her against the wall. The cold granite pressed against her cheek as the handcuffs clinked shut. Non-compliant, he muttered for the benefit of his body cam that, conveniently, he'd claim later had malfunctioned. Possible theft of court property. Two other officers appeared, O'Connor and Perez, coffee cups in hand, faces bored. "What's the story?" O'Connor asked. "Caught her trying to sneak in with stolen docs," Russo said. "Got mouthy when I asked for ID." Amara inhaled through her nose, steadying herself. "Officer, you're making a serious mistake." Russo's laugh was thin. "Everyone says that. You think this is your building?" "I do," she replied quietly. Perez raised his phone, pretending to check a text, but angling the camera toward her. "Gotta love mornings," he whispered. Rain started. Just a mist. Enough to smudge the ink on the fallen documents. One page slid to a stop near Russo's boot. The header clearly stamped, "Confidential, Court File." He didn't notice. "Pick those up," he ordered O'Connor, jerking his chin toward the papers. "Man, she's lucky you didn't tase her," O'Connor muttered as he stooped. Amara's cheek burned. She focused on the brass plaque above the doors. Metropolitan Justice Complex. She had walked through those doors nearly every morning for 23 years. She counted the seconds, one heartbeat per number, until she could speak again without shaking. "I need my identification," she said. "It's in my coat pocket." "You'll get it when I say you get it," Russo snapped. "You people always got excuses." Her lips parted slightly. Not from fear, but disbelief. "You people." She filed the phrase away. Evidence. They marched her through the metal detector. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Clerks stared. A bailiff behind the security desk froze mid-sip. Garcia, a veteran guard, recognized her face, but not yet the context. "Officer Russo," he began cautiously. "What's this about?" "Routine stop," Russo said briskly. "Trespassing with stolen property." Garcia's brow furrowed. His eyes flicked from Amara's face to the papers clutched in O'Connor's hands, then to the bruise darkening her cheek. "Maybe you should double-check. Stay out of it." Russo cut him off. They sat her in a molded plastic chair. Her cuffs bit into her wrists. She stared at the floor tiles, same pattern she'd approved during the courthouse renovation 5 years earlier. "Name," Russo said, flipping open his notepad. "Amara Lewis. Spell it." She did. He wrote it wrong. Occupation. A pause. "You'll find out soon enough." Perez snorted. "She's got jokes." Russo leaned closer. "You can play smart all you want, lady. I've been doing this 15 years. I know trouble when I see it." Amara tilted her head, studying him as if he were an exhibit. 15 years? She repeated softly. "That's long enough to know the law, isn't it?" "Don't test me. Then you'll understand when I formally request that all security footage from the front steps and lobby between 8:30 and 9 o'clock be preserved, including your body cam backup." Russo blinked, momentarily thrown off script. Excuse me? You heard me. O'Connor chuckled. She's quoting law like she's in a movie. Garcia was standing now, the realization dawning in fragments. The cadence of her voice, the way she looked people straight in the eye. His mouth went dry. "Tony," he murmured, "maybe check her ID before—" Russo ignored him. "Save your lawyer act for the arraignment." He motioned to the inner doors. "Let's go. You can tell it to the judge." Amara rose, chains glinting under the fluorescent light. Her reflection flashed across the lobby's glass wall. Small, restrained, but upright. She squared her shoulders the way she always did before entering a courtroom. As they led her toward the elevator, she glanced once more at the brass letters gleaming above the entrance. Justice Complex. The irony was almost too perfect. She thought of the robe hanging in her chambers upstairs, the gavel resting on her desk, the docket waiting for her signature. She thought of the system she had sworn to defend, and how easily its servants could twist it into a weapon. Her voice was steady when she spoke again. "All right, Officer Russo. Let's go inside." And the doors closed behind them with the soft final click of inevitability. The courtroom smelled of burnt coffee and nervous paperwork. Officer Anthony Russo adjusted his tie as he stepped to the witness stand, the cuffs of his uniform still damp from the rain outside. He'd been here before, different faces, same performance. Just tell it clean, confident, and the system would nod along. Across the room, Amara Lewis sat at the defendant's table, wrists cuffed in front of her, a faint bruise coloring her cheekbone. The woman who had spent decades commanding this chamber now occupied the chair reserved for the accused. Only she knew the irony in full. "State your name for the record," said Judge Richard Halpern, a narrow man in his 60s whose expression suggested permanent indigestion. "Officer Anthony Russo, Your Honor. 15 years with the NYPD. "And what happened this morning, Officer Russo?" asked Prosecutor Elaine Porter, her tone rehearsed. Friendly, one of those prosecutors who always trusted the badge over the bruised. Russo leaned toward the microphone, voice firm. "At approximately 8:45 a.m., I observed a suspicious individual attempting to breach courthouse security through a restricted entrance. The subject refused to comply with standard procedures and became combative. For safety, I restrained her using minimum force." Porter nodded, scribbling nothing on her pad. "And you identified this individual?" "Yes, ma'am. She provided no valid ID, carried a briefcase full of what appeared to be stolen legal documents, official files. I suspected possible fraud or impersonation. Did she resist?" Russo gave a solemn nod, aggressively, yelling, cursing, claiming she was someone important. It's a pattern I've seen before, folks trying to dodge accountability by pretending to be lawyers or judges. Judge Halpern raised an eyebrow. "You say she claimed to be someone important?" "Yes, Your Honor. Told me I was making a mistake, that I'd regret it. Standard tactic." In the gallery, Officer Perez stifled a laugh, and O'Connor shifted his weight with a smirk. They had heard Russo spin this routine 100 times different targets, same lines. Amara sat motionless, eyes downcast, listening. Her breathing was slow, measured. She'd seen perjury before, she just hadn't expected to be its target. "Officer Russo," the prosecutor continued, "did you have your body camera on during this incident?" "It malfunctioned this morning," Russo replied smoothly, "but I captured partial footage on my phone after detaining the subject." "How convenient," Amara murmured, the first words she'd spoken since her arrest. Halpern's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Nothing, Your Honor," she said, her tone steady. Her gaze fixed on Russo, unblinking. The officer's throat tightened. He cleared it, forging ahead. "I was simply doing my job." The defendant posed a potential threat to courthouse security. In my professional opinion, she was unstable, possibly under the influence. Halpern nodded gravely. "Your restraint is noted, officer. Restraint." The word landed like a slap. Prosecutor Porter folded her hands. The state recommends charges of trespassing, resisting arrest, and assault on an officer. Russo's lips curled slightly. He could already taste victory, the quiet satisfaction of another disorderly neutralized, the paperwork filed, the narrative sealed. Across the room, Amara sat like a storm held inside a glass jar. She had spent decades presiding over testimonies like this, officers telling half-truths dressed as heroics, judges too eager to believe. Now she was trapped within her own system's blind spots. Judge Halpern leaned back. "Miss Lewis, do you understand the charges?" "I do," she replied evenly, "and I look forward to addressing them." Her calm unsettled him. He had expected trembling, apology, maybe anger, but not composure. "You'll have your chance to speak," he said curtly. "For now, the record will reflect—" "Your Honor," Amara interrupted softly, "before we proceed, I'd like clarification on one point. Officer Russo stated he detained me at 8:45 a.m. outside the main entrance?" Russo frowned. "That's correct. And you described that area as restricted?" "Yes." She tilted her head. "Interesting, because according to the City Ordinance 1174, the main steps of this building are public access until 9 a.m., at which point only the security checkpoint limits entry. You can confirm that with courthouse administration." The courtroom went quiet. The stenographer's fingers paused, uncertain. Porter recovered first. "Ms. Lewis, you'll have an opportunity to present your defense?" "Of course," Amara said. "But truth doesn't need an appointment, counselor." A murmur rippled through the room. Russo's jaw flexed. He'd lost control of the script for the first time. "Your Honor," Amara continued, "I would also request preservation of all surveillance footage from the courthouse exterior and lobby between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. The cameras at this facility record continuously, as you know." Porter's pen stopped moving. Halpern frowned. "That's an unusual request for a defendant without counsel." "I'm familiar with my constitutional rights," she replied, "including the right to evidence in my defense." Russo glanced at O'Connor, who looked suddenly uneasy. "Cameras?" he mouthed. Russo ignored him. Judge Halpern hesitated, then shrugged. "Very well. The request is noted." Amara folded her hands. "Thank you, Your Honor." Porter sighed, forcing a smile. "Let the record also reflect that the defendant has been cooperative since entering custody." "Cooperative?" Russo muttered. "Officer," Halpern warned. "That will be all. You may step down." Russo swallowed his irritation and returned to his seat. But as he passed Amara, she met his eyes, calm, sharp, certain. It was the look of someone who had already seen how the story ended. For the first time all morning, Russo felt something cold coil in his chest. The gavel struck. "Court will recess for 15 minutes. Amara exhaled, slow and deliberate. The storm was beginning to turn. 15 minutes later, the courtroom buzzed like a nest disturbed. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the city washed and watchful. Judge Halpern returned to the bench with a refill of burnt coffee, while Prosecutor Porter whispered with Officer Russo, whose confidence had mostly returned. He'd told his story well enough. The system would keep him safe. It always had. At the defense table, Amara Lewis sat perfectly still. Her hands, still cuffed, rested lightly on a stack of papers that had been retrieved from the courthouse steps. Her posture carried the poise of someone used to commanding silence, not pleading for it. "Court is back in session," Halpern announced, tapping his pen like a gavel substitute. "Miss Lewis, you may now address the court. Keep your remarks concise." "Thank you, Your Honor." Amara rose slowly, every movement deliberate. The bruise along her cheek had deepened to a shade of storm gray, but her eyes held the same calm steel they always had when presiding over arguments far messier than this one. I'd like to clarify several inaccuracies in Officer Russo's testimony, she began, voice measured, resonant. According to his statement, I was apprehended while attempting to breach a restricted area. That is false. I was approaching the main public entrance, an area open to all until 9 a.m., as City Ordinance 11-74 explicitly confirms. The stenographer hesitated before catching up, her keys clacking louder than usual. Porter's eyebrows lifted slightly. Russo frowned, trying to recall if he had ever heard that ordinance before. I was also accused of carrying stolen legal documents, Amara continued, gesturing toward the evidence table. Those documents are official case files. They belong to this courthouse, specifically to Chamber 4A. Halpern squinted. Chamber 4A? Yes, Your Honor. She turned to him fully, her tone crisp but respectful. The files bear judicial letterhead, pending case numbers, and my own notes in the margins. Anyone here is welcome to inspect them. Russo's mouth went dry. Her notes? Porter leaned toward him. Is that accurate? She whispered. Russo swallowed. Could be forged, he muttered. Amara heard him. Forgery requires access to official seals, Your Honor. As the officer has likely forgotten, this building keeps all such seals in a locked archive 2 floors below us. I would hardly be able to access them while standing outside in the rain. A few people in the gallery exchanged glances. A clerk in the second row leaned toward another, whispering a name she hadn't dared to say aloud yet. Amara's voice stayed even. Next, Officer Russo claimed I became verbally aggressive. I intend to remain silent on that point under the Fifth Amendment, though I will note that any statements I made were direct responses to being physically assaulted without provocation. Halpern frowned. Are you alleging misconduct? I'm alleging assault, she said. The words rippled through the room like the first roll of thunder. Russo shifted in his seat. Porter cleared her throat. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. On the contrary, Amara said smoothly, it's entirely appropriate for a defendant to cite violations of constitutional rights. Furthermore, I request an immediate preservation order for all surveillance footage between 8:30 and 9 this morning from courthouse cameras, lobby systems, and any officer body cams. The prosecutor bristled. You can't just... I can, Amara interrupted, her tone still calm. Brady v. Maryland ensures the preservation of potentially exculpatory evidence, even when a defendant represents herself, unless, of course, the state prefers to risk suppression on due process grounds. The gallery went still. Even Halpern's pen stopped tapping. Miss Lewis, he said carefully, you seem unusually familiar with judicial procedure. I have some experience, she replied. Russo's palms were slick now. This wasn't the nervous sweat of confrontation. It was the colder kind, the kind that came when instinct whispered, you've picked the wrong person. Your Honor, she continued, Officer Russo also testified that I refused to identify myself. That, too, is false. I offered my identification, which he declined to examine before handcuffing me. Do you still have that identification? Halpern asked. I do. She reached, slow and deliberate, into the pocket of her coat. Every eye tracked her hand as she drew out a leather wallet, worn smooth at the corners. She placed it on the table, flipped it open, and turned it toward the bench. Even from several feet away, the gold federal seal caught the overhead lights. The courtroom inhaled as one. I believe, Amara said quietly, this will resolve any confusion about who I am and why I had access to those documents. Halpern's expression collapsed into disbelief. That's a judicial credential. Yes, Your Honor, mine. She held his gaze. I am Judge Amara Lewis, presiding judge of the Metropolitan District Court, this courthouse. A sound escaped the room, half gasp, half groan. Porter went pale. Russo froze, every lie calcifying inside him. Halpern's pen rolled off the bench and clattered onto the floor. "Good Lord," he muttered. Amara closed her wallet and set it beside her. So, as the record now reflects, Officer Russo not only detained a federal judge performing her lawful duties, but also assaulted her in full view of courthouse cameras. Russo tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. I didn't know." "That," Amara said softly, "is precisely the problem." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the humming of the fluorescent lights seemed to retreat. Halpern finally managed, "Court will recess immediately." As the gavel struck, Russo's stomach dropped through the floor. He'd told a story to the system that always believed him. But for once, the system had a witness who outranked it. And somewhere deep inside, he already knew the story had just changed authors. The moment the gavel fell, the courtroom fractured into whispers. Lawyers slipped out to call colleagues. A clerk rushed toward the door and then stopped, unsure whether leaving would look cowardly or smart. On the bench, Judge Halpern sat frozen, face pale and hands twitching near his coffee cup as though the ritual of drinking could steady the moment. Officer Anthony Russo stood at the prosecutor's table, stiff, every instinct screaming for an exit that didn't exist. His two partners, O'Connor and Perez, avoided eye contact entirely, pretending to study the floor tiles. The sound of rain had stopped, but it might as well have been pouring inside the room. In the holding room down the hall, Judge Amara Lewis sat on a metal chair, wrists now free. Her reflection stared back at her from the window's faint tint, a bruise blooming beneath her left eye, the faint red indent from the cuffs circling her wrists. She pressed a cold paper cup of water against her cheek and exhaled. The door cracked open. Bailiff Garcia stepped inside, hat clutched in both hands. "Your Honor," he said softly. The title came out with a tremor, heavy with shame. I didn't recognize you. I'm sorry." Amara gave a small nod. "You weren't the one swinging the handcuffs, Garcia." He swallowed hard. "What would you like me to do?" "Go to my chambers," she said, voice low, controlled. "Bring my robes, the black set with the gold trim. They're in the garment bag, and my gavel the one from my swearing in." Garcia hesitated only a second before nodding. "Yes, Your Honor." As he left, she pulled out her phone, recently returned by the clerk who now couldn't meet her eyes. There were missed calls, frantic messages from her assistant, and one voicemail from Chief Judge Marjorie Klein. "Amara, what's going on?" Security reported an incident. Amara dialed back. Klein answered immediately. "Amara, thank God. Are you hurt?" "I'll live," Amara replied, "but I need something done right now. Quietly. Anything. I want all surveillance footage from 8:30 to 9 a.m. This morning, secured and copied. Every camera outside and inside the courthouse. Every officer body cam. Multiple backups, different servers. Klein didn't ask why. Consider it done. Do I need to call the U.S. Attorney's Office? Not yet. For now. Just keep it in the judiciary. And Marjorie, her tone hardened. Pull every case file where Officer Anthony Russo has ever testified. 5 years back, minimum. There was silence on the other end. "Amara, are you telling me?" "I'm telling you he assaulted me on the courthouse steps, called me a filthy stray, and told me I belonged in a cage. Then he lied about it under oath." Klein inhaled sharply. "Jesus. Save your prayers for when I'm back on the bench," Amara said, "because we're not done." A knock. Garcia returned, breathless, carrying a long garment bag and a small wooden case. "Here, Your Honor, and the robe looks good as new." Amara rose, unzipping the bag. The black fabric shimmered faintly under the fluorescent light. She slipped it over her shoulders with practiced ease, feeling its familiar weight settle into place. Authority wasn't armor, but right now it felt close. Garcia handed over the wooden case. Inside, her ceremonial gavel rested on red velvet. She ran her thumb across the engraving. "Justice is blind, but she never forgets. "Garcia," she said, her voice regaining its full strength. "When I walk into that courtroom, announce me properly." He blinked. "Properly?" "Yes," she said, fastening the collar, "as you would any presiding judge." He nodded, the gravity of the moment anchoring him. "Yes, ma'am. The Honorable Judge Amara Lewis presiding." "Good." She adjusted the sleeves, squared her shoulders. "Let's go remind everyone whose courtroom this is." Inside, the chatter died the instant the bailiff's booming voice filled the chamber. "All rise!" The words echoed like a thunderclap through the marble hall. Courtroom doors swung open and Amara entered through the side corridor reserved for judges. The black robes flowed around her like a shadow reclaimed. The bruise on her cheek was still visible, but now it looked like a badge of defiance. "Court is now in session," Garcia continued. "The Honorable Judge Amara Lewis presiding." The entire room froze. Judge Halpern stumbled halfway out of his chair. "Your Honor, I didn't realize—" "You may return to your docket, Judge Halpern," Amara said, her tone even but edged with steel. "I'll resume proceedings here." Halpern all but fled, gathering his papers like a man escaping a fire. Amara took her seat behind the bench, and let her eyes travel across the room. Every gaze fell to the floor. Only Russo looked up, his face ashen, mouth parted in disbelief. "Officer Russo," she said quietly, "remain standing." He obeyed before he knew why. "Rough morning, isn't it?" she asked, her voice smooth as glass. He swallowed. "Your Honor, She lifted a hand. "You've said enough for now." The room was utterly still. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the air conditioning droned faintly, and for the first time in years, every person present felt what justice actually sounded like: silence before the verdict. Amara rested her fingertips on the bench, feeling the cool grain of the wood. Earlier today, this court heard testimony under oath regarding an alleged trespasser and an officer's heroism. I believe it's time we review that testimony accurately this time. Russo's pulse thudded so hard he could hear it. "I trust," Amara continued, "that the footage Chief Judge Klein just secured will clarify matters. But for now, Officer Russo, let's begin with something simpler." She leaned forward, eyes locked on him. "You told this court that people like me think they're above the law. Let's find out who actually is." Her gavel struck once, sharp as lightning, and just like that, the balance of power flipped. The echo of the gavel still hung in the air when Judge Amara Lewis leaned back in her chair. The weight of the black robe settled perfectly against her shoulders, familiar and grounding. Beneath the bench, her heel tapped once, twice, the only outward sign that her pulse was steadying after a morning that had torn the system open. "Let the record show," she said, voice clear, "that I have resumed my duties as presiding judge of this court." Across the room, Officer Anthony Russo stood rigid, his badge glinting under the fluorescent light, like a mocking reflection of everything he claimed to represent. His partners O'Connor and Perez tried to blend into the background, but the room was too small for invisibility. Prosecutor Elaine Porter sat motionless, fingers white around her pen, eyes fixed on the desk before her. Amara turned toward the clerk. "Ms. Singh, please retrieve the morning's surveillance footage from the courthouse network. All cameras, lobby and exterior." "Yes, Your Honor," Singh said, her voice trembling but obedient. Amara nodded. "Also request a copy from the Chief Judge's office. They've already preserved it." A murmur ran through the room. Russo shifted, looking at Porter, then back at Amara. "Your Honor, if I may—" "No," she said simply. "You may not." The word landed with surgical precision. Amara opened a folder on the bench, not the one the officers had seized earlier, but another, thicker, older. Inside were case notes, printouts, and statistics that had taken months to compile. "I was scheduled," she continued, to preside over a disciplinary hearing next week concerning systemic misconduct within the NYPD's 11th Precinct. Officer Russo, your name appears in nearly half the incident reports under review." A visible shiver ran through the room. "That's absurd," Russo managed. "I've never—" "Lied under oath?" Amara interrupted, one eyebrow raised. "Assaulted civilians? Filed reports without corroborating evidence? Used excessive force in a manner later ruled procedurally justified?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was precise, cold. Every word sharpened by years of listening to men like him talk circles around truth. Porter cleared her throat. "Your Honor, if I may clarify, Internal Affairs has not—" "I am Internal Affairs today," Amara said. "This courtroom is no longer operating under the illusion of routine. What happened this morning was not an isolated lapse. It was a symptom." O'Connor muttered under his breath. Perez nudged him, too late. "Officer O'Connor," Amara said without even glancing up, "would you like that repeated for the transcript?" He went still. "No, Your Honor." "Wise." Singh returned a few minutes later, balancing a flash drive in her hand like a piece of evidence glowing with radioactive heat. "The footage, Your Honor." From 8:34 to 9:02 a.m., Amara accepted it with a nod and turned to Garcia, who had resumed his post near the door, posture stiff with guilt and pride. "Mr. Garcia, please prepare the monitor." "Yes, Your Honor." When the screen flickered to life, the courtroom held its breath. The grainy security feed showed the courthouse steps under gray morning light. Then the scene unfolded in silence, Russo blocking Amara's path, the slap, the fall of papers, the handcuffs. Even without sound, the violence was undeniable. Porter's jaw tightened. She stared at the floor. When the audio came on, captured by the external mic above the entrance, the words filled the room like poison gas. "Filthy stray, you belong behind bars." Gasps rippled across the benches. Someone cursed softly. Russo's face drained of color. He looked like a man staring at his own eulogy. Amara let the clip run until the end, where the video froze on Russo shoving her toward the lobby doors. She reached forward, clicked the pause icon herself, and let the still image hang between them. "Officer Russo," she said quietly, "would you like to revise your testimony?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "No?" she continued. "Then we'll proceed on record with the evidence as presented." Her tone softened only slightly. "I want you to understand something, officer. I didn't put on this robe to humiliate you. I put it on to remind this institution, all of it, that accountability does not vanish once you pin on a badge." The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. She turned toward Porter. "Counselor Porter, you will file a motion to vacate all charges against me immediately. Afterward, you will prepare a statement for the district attorney's office explaining that the state's witness perjured himself under oath." Porter's throat bobbed. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you," Amara added, glancing toward O'Connor and Perez, "will surrender your service weapons and badges before leaving this building. There will be formal charges pending." Perez's voice cracked. "Your Honor, please, we just followed protocol." "Then your protocol is broken," Amara said. She stood, the robe cascading around her like a dark wave. "This court will recess for 1 hour. During that time, Chief Judge Klein and federal oversight will be notified. When we return, this will not be a courtroom. It will be a reckoning." Her gavel struck once, not loud, but final. Russo slumped into his seat, eyes unfocused, the sound echoing through him like the toll of a bell. When the hour ended, the courthouse doors reopened to a different kind of silence, the heavy, waiting kind that gathers before history happens. Reporters had already begun clustering on the front steps, flashes popping through the glass as rumors of a police assault on a federal judge rippled across Manhattan. Inside, court officers whispered into radios, uncertain whether to salute or flee. Judge Amara Lewis returned through the same corridor she had walked every morning for 2 decades. The robe swayed at her ankles, her gavel tucked beneath her arm. Her reflection followed in the polished wall glass, calm, bruised, resolute, each step measured, each breath deliberate. When she entered the courtroom, Bailiff Garcia's voice rang out again. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Amara Lewis." The audience obeyed. Even those who moments earlier had doubted her authority now stood reflexively, eyes averted, shame and awe mixing in the same breath. "Be seated," she said, her voice carrying the weight of restored order. Officer Anthony Russo stood beside Prosecutor Elaine Porter, who looked 10 years older than she had an hour before. His uniform jacket was gone, his shirt wrinkled, badge surrendered. O'Connor and Perez sat behind him, their hands clasped, faces gray. Amara placed the gavel down gently and folded her hands atop the bench. "We reconvene under extraordinary circumstances. I am mindful that this is not just a courtroom today. It is a mirror." No one moved. "Mr. Russo," she continued, her gaze fixed on him, "before we proceed with the legal implications of your actions, I want the truth stated plainly. What compelled you this morning to treat another human being with such contempt?" Russo's mouth opened, closed again. His voice, when it came, was rough. "I thought you were someone else." "You did," she agreed quietly. "Someone less deserving of dignity, perhaps?" He flinched. "Your Honor?" Porter interjected softly. "Officer Russo wishes to express remorse." "Remorse is not an eraser, Counselor," Amara said. "It's only a mirror turned too late." She reached for the flash drive still resting beside her. "For the record, the video evidence we viewed earlier has been authenticated by both courthouse security and the Chief Judge's office. It will remain sealed under judicial order until further review." Garcia dimmed the lights. The projector screen flickered to life again. Amara nodded to Singh. "Play the next sequence." This footage was from a different angle, an interior camera in the lobby. It showed Russo dragging Amara past the magnetometers, barking orders at Garcia. The audio was crystal clear. "Non-compliant," Russo's voice said. "Possible theft of court property." "You're making a mistake," came Amara's reply. "You people always say that." A collective exhale rippled through the room. The words hung there, ugly and irreversible. Amara let the video play another 30 seconds before gesturing for it to stop. "That phrase," she said softly, "has a long and violent history in this city. It's the prelude to every abuse that hides behind the word procedure." Porter lowered her eyes. O'Connor and Perez sat frozen. Amara continued, "When institutions forget that power exists to protect, not to dominate, justice becomes theater. Today the curtain comes down." She looked at Russo again. "Officer, do you recognize the man in that video?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor. And is that man acting in accordance with the oath he swore to uphold?" He shook his head. "No, Mom." Her tone remained calm. "Then state it clearly for the record." Russo's voice cracked. "No, Your Honor, I violated that oath." The words seemed to echo longer than they should have. Amara nodded once. "Acknowledgement is the first honest thing you've said in this courtroom." She turned to Porter. "Counselor, I trust the district attorney will proceed with charges appropriate to perjury, unlawful detention, and assault on a federal officer." Porter nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, Your Honor." Amara shifted her focus to O'Connor and Perez. "Your silence earlier, your complicity, is not invisible. This court will forward your conduct to internal affairs. I suggest you prepare accordingly." Perez's voice came out small. "We didn't know who you were." "That's exactly the tragedy," she said. "You shouldn't have needed to." She paused, letting the words settle like dust after demolition. "The footage," she went on, "will not only exonerate me, it will become part of a larger inquiry, one that doesn't end with this courtroom. She reached for a sheet of paper and read aloud. Effective immediately, I am petitioning for federal oversight of the 11th Precinct's disciplinary records, including all cases where excessive force was dismissed without review. Russo closed his eyes. Each sentence felt like another door shutting behind him. Amara set the document aside. This proceeding is no longer about a single act of violence. It's about the pattern that allowed it. Every unchecked complaint, every falsified report, every shrug from a superior who didn't want to see the cost. Her gavel hovered for a moment, then came down once, crisp, deliberate. This court finds probable cause for criminal misconduct. Officer Russo, you are hereby remanded into federal custody pending indictment. Gasps rose, but she silenced them with a raised hand. You are not my enemy, she said to him. Quieter now. You are my lesson to this city. The law isn't supposed to shield power. It's supposed to protect truth. Remember that, if you ever get another chance to wear that badge. 2 federal marshals stepped forward. Russo didn't resist as they cuffed him. He glanced once toward Amara, not defiant this time, just hollow, before they led him away. The judge exhaled, leaning back slightly. Outside, the sirens began to wail, not for her, but for the system that had finally been caught in its own reflection. The courtroom emptied slowly after Russo's arrest, but the air refused to clear. Every person who remained, clerks, reporters, attorneys, seemed unwilling to look at anyone else. Justice, when it turned real, made people uneasy. Judge Amara Lewis stayed seated behind the bench as the marshals escorted Russo through the side door. His absence didn't lighten the atmosphere. It only deepened the silence. The city outside still hummed, indifferent, but inside the Metropolitan Justice Complex, the machinery of denial had finally jammed. Court will continue, she said at last. Her tone was softer now, but still carried the iron that had silenced men far more dangerous than Russo. We have unfinished matters to address. Officers O'Connor and Perez exchanged a glance, both pale and sweating. Their lawyer, a city-appointed counsel who had arrived minutes before, sat rigid beside them, unsure whether to speak or stay invisible. Amara tapped her gavel once, lightly. You both witnessed Officer Russo's conduct this morning. You were present when he struck me, when he fabricated his statement, and when he testified falsely under oath. Do you deny this? O'Connor swallowed. Your Honor, I didn't see everything. It happened fast. She tilted her head. Then allow me to help refresh your memory. She nodded to Miss Singh, who once again dimmed the lights and cued another clip from the courthouse's internal archive. This time, the footage came from O'Connor's own body camera. The audio clear, the lens angled just enough to capture the chaos. Step back, Russo's voice barked. You're making a mistake, came Amara's reply. O'Connor's voice followed, half laughing. She's lucky you didn't tase her. The recording continued, showing O'Connor glancing down at the spilled papers, then looking directly into the camera lens before muttering, Shall learn. When the video ended, no one spoke. Amara's voice broke the silence. Officer O'Connor, would you like to explain that statement to the court? He slumped slightly. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? He stared at the table. We joke around sometimes. It was wrong. I shouldn't have said it. Correct, she replied evenly. You shouldn't have said it. You also shouldn't have laughed while a fellow officer violated the Constitution on the courthouse steps. Her gaze shifted to Perez. And you, Officer Perez. Your body camera was operational as well. Please confirm that. Perez nodded reluctantly. Then let's hear yours. The next video flickered onto the screen. The camera trembled as Perez moved, the perspective catching glimpses of Russo gripping Amara's arm, O'Connor stooping for papers, the courthouse crowd frozen in disbelief. But it was the audio that mattered most. Perez's voice, get the part where she tries to bolt. O'Connor. Man, she's lucky you didn't tase her. Russo. Filthy stray, you belong behind bars. Perez's voice followed, low but clear. Yeah, get her good side. The lights came back on. No one dared move. Amara took a long breath before speaking. Every word of that recording is an indictment, not only of individual cruelty, but of a culture that rewards it. Perez's voice trembled. Your Honor, we didn't know. You didn't need to know who I was, she interrupted. You only needed to know what was right. Her tone softened just slightly. I've spent 30 years on this bench listening to officers testify about split-second decisions, but this wasn't one. This was a ritual. The same ritual that has kept this city's most vulnerable in fear while men like you laughed. Perez lowered his head. O'Connor rubbed his hands over his face as if trying to erase himself. Amara looked down at her notes, then back up. The footage has been authenticated. The Justice Department will receive it within the hour. Both of you are suspended from duty pending federal investigation. Their lawyer finally spoke, voice small. Your Honor, my clients are deeply remorseful. They intend to cooperate fully. Cooperation, Amara said, is a beginning, not an absolution. She stood, letting the robe fall naturally into place. Let me tell you what happens next. The Department of Justice will review 15 years of disciplinary records, yours included. Every dismissed complaint, every unexplained injury, every falsified report will see daylight. This is not vengeance, it's inventory. Her words landed like quiet hammer blows. I want you to understand, she continued, that what happened today doesn't just end your careers. It exposes a system built to protect itself. But every structure, no matter how fortified, collapses the same way, one crack at a time. You gentlemen were the first. O'Connor's eyes glistened. Your Honor, I never meant... I know, she said softly. Most people never mean to. But meaning is irrelevant to justice. The marshals stepped forward to escort the officers out. Neither resisted. The heavy doors closed behind them, and for the first time all morning, the room felt breathable. Amara turned to the clerk's bench. Ms. Singh, send certified copies of today's recordings to the Chief Judge, the U.S. Attorney, and the Civil Rights Division. Mark them urgent. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked out over the remaining audience. The clerks, the reporters, the attorneys who now realized they had witnessed something irreversible. This is not the end, Amara said quietly. It's the clearing of ground. Before a city can rebuild trust, it must first dig out every rotten foundation. She raised the gavel one last time. Court adjourned, for now. When it fell, the sound didn't just signal an ending. It sounded like something larger cracking open, the first tremor of justice finally shifting beneath New York's streets. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of New York day where sunlight cuts through the skyline like truth through denial. The Metropolitan Justice Complex sat under a swarm of cameras. Reporters clogged the marble steps, shouting questions toward anyone who passed. Was it true? Would the judge testify? Was Officer Russo really in federal custody? Inside, the courthouse buzzed with the low hum of consequence. Federal investigators had arrived at dawn, carrying boxes, scanners, and subpoenas. The 11th Precinct's records were being hauled out piece by piece, 15 years of routine paperwork suddenly glowing under new scrutiny. In courtroom 4A, Judge Amara Lewis took her seat once more. The bruise on her face had faded to a soft gold, but her presence was more formidable than ever. The robe, the gavel, the stillness, all restored to their rightful weight. The gallery was packed. Journalists, law students, civil rights attorneys, officers from other precincts who had come to see whether this woman would truly do what no one before her had dared. Court is now in session, said Bailiff Garcia, his voice firmer than it had been the day before. Amara surveyed the room. Yesterday, this court witnessed an act of violence that was not only physical, but institutional. Today, we address the structure that made it possible. Prosecutor Elaine Porter rose, visibly uneasy. Your Honor, the state has reviewed the new evidence. Officer Russo and his associates will face federal charges, assault, perjury, and civil rights violations. However, there is no however, Amara cut in, though not unkindly. Justice doesn't come with a comma. She turned to the clerk. Please read the record of disciplinary data. Ms. Singh stood, holding a printout that spanned multiple pages. Her voice was steady as she read, Between 2010 and 2025, Officer Anthony Russo was the subject of 32 formal complaints, including use of excessive force, falsified reports, and unlawful detainment. None resulted in termination. 21 were dismissed without investigation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters typed furiously. Amara continued. In each case, the complaints were labeled unsubstantiated, yet the evidence shows patterns too consistent to ignore. The precinct's internal review board repeatedly failed to act, not because of lack of proof, but because accountability was never the goal. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. That ends today. Russo was not in the courtroom. He sat in a federal holding cell downtown, awaiting arraignment, but his presence lingered like smoke. Amara's eyes flicked toward the front row where O'Connor and Perez sat with their attorney, now stripped of badges, awaiting sentencing. This court, she said, formally recommends prosecution under Section 242 of Title 18, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. Officer Russo's conduct qualifies, as do the acts of his colleagues. O'Connor lowered his gaze. Perez wept silently beside him, but Amara wasn't finished. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause to investigate systemic misconduct within the 11th Precinct. The Department of Justice has already authorized a federal oversight commission. Effective immediately, all pending cases involving officers from that precinct are stayed until review. The room erupted, half gasps, half applause. Garcia had to call for order twice before silence returned. Amara's gaze swept across the gallery. You will hear people say this is unprecedented. It is not. The law has always held this power, it simply forgot how to use it. She reached for the sentencing file. Regarding Officer Russo, after reviewing his record, testimony, and verified evidence, this court recommends a federal sentence of 25 years without parole. The sentence reflects not only his individual actions, but the cumulative harm of a career built on intimidation. Even the court reporters froze, hands hovering over keys. Justice, Amara said softly, is not vengeance. It's balance restored. She leaned forward. And balance demands consequence. There was no applause this time, no sound at all. The verdict hung in the air like the toll of a great bell, deep, undeniable. After a pause, Amara continued. This ruling will be transmitted directly to the Federal District Court for confirmation. Until then, all officers implicated in related incidents are suspended. The city's attorney will coordinate with the Justice Department to oversee the transition to external oversight. Porter nodded faintly. Her earlier arrogance dissolved. Understood, Your Honor. Good, Amara said. Now let's address restitution. She gestured toward a file marked Civil Claims, Prior Dismissals. For every citizen unlawfully detained or assaulted by this department, this city owes acknowledgement and repair. The justice system cannot merely punish the oppressor, it must heal the oppressed. I will be establishing a judicial review panel to reopen those cases. From the back row, a young woman, a public defender, whispered, She's rewriting the city. Amara heard her. Not rewriting, she corrected. Reclaiming. She let the word linger. Then quietly, this courthouse bears the name Metropolitan Justice Complex. Today, I suggest it start earning it. The audience rose to their feet without prompting. It wasn't applause, not yet. It was reverence. a recognition that something had shifted in the marrow of the institution. Amara's voice softened. For decades, people have asked what justice looks like. Today, it looks like accountability. It looks like truth wearing a bruise but standing tall. She lifted the gavel, its handle gleaming under the courtroom lights. Let the record show, justice has not left this city. She merely waited for someone to remember her name. And with a single resonant strike, she brought it down. By the end of that week, New York City had become a stage. Every network ran the same footage on loop. The courthouse steps, the officer's hand raised, the judge's fall, and then her rise. Judge Amara Lewis' name filled headlines, podcasts, talk shows. Some called her a hero, others a threat. The truth was simpler. She had become the system's mirror, and no one liked what they saw. Outside her apartment on East 72nd Street, crowds gathered every morning, supporters with placards reading "Justice Lives Here," and critics accusing her of betrayal. The sidewalks were a battlefield of slogans and cell phones. Amara walked through them quietly, flanked by two plainclothes marshals, expression unreadable. Inside, the apartment was a refuge of silence. The city's noise dimmed against thick glass and heavier thoughts. She sat at her desk, stacks of case files surrounding her like a fortress. The bruise on her face had turned yellow at the edges, fading like the last trace of outrage. Her phone vibrated. Chief Judge Marjorie Klein, again. Amara answered on the second ring. "Morning, Marjorie." "You've turned the entire judiciary into a headline," Klein said, half admiring, half exhausted. "Do you have any idea how many officials are panicking right now?" "I'd guess all of them, pretty much." Klein sighed. The Attorney General called. "He wants to meet next week, quietly. They're talking about forming a permanent oversight bureau, something modeled after your findings." "Then maybe this city's finally learning," Amara said. "Don't mistake their fear for enlightenment," Klein replied. "They'll try to neutralize you before they follow you." Amara smiled faintly. "Then they should move quickly." "I'm not done yet." When the call ended, she sat for a moment, staring at the morning light climbing the buildings opposite her window. It painted everything gold, the rooftops, the glass towers, even the grimy fire escapes. The city looked clean for once, but she knew better. Nothing in New York ever stayed clean for long. Later that day, she returned to the courthouse for the final review session with the Federal Oversight Commission. The press was barred from entry, though that hadn't stopped half the city from speculating about what would happen inside. The commission occupied a long mahogany table in Chamber 4A, the same room where she'd first been humiliated, then vindicated. Across from her sat Deputy Director Thomas Greer, a man who spoke like a press release and blinked like a metronome. "Judge Lewis," he began, "we want to thank you for your cooperation. The department recognizes the bravery required to confront systemic misconduct." "I didn't do it for recognition," she said. "Of course. Still, your actions have complicated existing hierarchies. The mayor's office is concerned about its image," she interrupted. "They should be. Image is the only justice they've ever pursued." Greer cleared his throat. "We're recommending new federal guidelines for local oversight. You'll be invited to consult, perhaps even chair a committee." "No committees," she said. "Change doesn't come from conferences. It comes from consequence." He hesitated. "You understand there will be backlash. Some officers are calling you a traitor. The union's already drafting a statement." "They can draft whatever they want," Amara said. "Words don't scare me. Silence does." The room went still. For a moment, even Greer looked human. He nodded. "Then, well, proceed as you've advised." Amara signed the final documents, her name looping across each page like a seal of defiance. Outside, dusk rolled in fast, the sky turning violet behind the skyline. She stood on the courthouse steps again, the same spot where she'd been handcuffed days earlier. The same marble, the same echo, but the city around her had shifted. People passing by slowed, recognizing her. Some offered cautious nods, others quiet thanks. Garcia approached from the side entrance. "Your Honor," he said, smiling shyly, "you should see the precinct today. Half their lockers are empty. Internal Affairs is camping there like it's a crime scene." "Good," she said. "Justice always needed a little chaos to get things moving." Garcia hesitated. "If you don't mind me saying, I've worked this courthouse 15 years. Never seen anyone make the law feel alive again. Guess I just wanted to thank you." Amara looked at him, the hint of warmth in her eyes. "You did the right thing when it mattered, Garcia. Don't underestimate that. The law's only alive when someone chooses to act." He nodded, words caught somewhere behind his smile. She watched him leave, then turned her gaze toward the skyline. Sirens wailed in the distance, weaving through traffic like the city's own heartbeat. She thought of Russo in a cell downtown, the man who'd called her filthy and told her she belonged behind bars. Now, he was the one living behind them. And yet, there was no triumph in that, only gravity. Because justice, real justice, wasn't victory. It was maintenance, constant, exhausting, unglamorous. And tonight, the city was breathing differently because someone had finally stopped pretending it was fine. Amara took a deep breath, the wind catching the edge of her robe as she descended the courthouse steps. Somewhere, flashbulbs went off. Somewhere, another case was waiting. The work wasn't finished. But for the first time in years, it was finally honest. 2 weeks later, winter settled over Manhattan like a held breath. The wind off the Hudson carried a bite sharp enough to sting skin and memory alike. For once, the city moved slower, not quieter, but more aware of itself. Sirens still wailed, taxis still cursed, but something beneath all that noise had shifted. People listened now. On the morning of December the 2nd, Judge Amara Lewis stood before the window of her chambers, coffee cooling untouched, beside a stack of new case files. Outside, snowflakes gathered like ash on the courthouse steps, the same steps that had rewritten her life. She'd spent 14 days under federal protection, enduring interviews, hearings, panels, and the slow, grinding process of transformation that justice always demanded. The Federal Oversight Commission had confirmed systemic misconduct in the 11th Precinct. Dozens of officers were under investigation. The mayor had promised sweeping reform, though Amara knew promises cost less than paper. Still, something real had taken root. She could feel it in the way Garcia greeted her each morning, in the respectful silence of clerks who once whispered jokes about her being too idealistic. Even in Porter's hesitant smile, the kind that said, "I finally understand what you meant." The intercom buzzed. "Your Honor," Singh's voice came through, "there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." "Who?" He didn't give a name. Just said, "You'll want to hear me out." Amara hesitated, then, "Send him in." The door opened, and a young man entered, mid-30s, clean-cut but tired, dressed in plain clothes that couldn't quite hide the posture of a cop. He stopped halfway to the desk. "Judge Lewis, I'm Detective Elias Navarro. I used to work with Russo." Her expression didn't change. "Then this should be interesting." "I'm not here to defend him," Navarro said quickly. "Quite the opposite. There's something you need to see." He pulled a small drive from his coat pocket and placed it gently on the desk. Body cam footage. From a raid last year, Russo led it. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, 3 civilians ended up hospitalized. The report was buried. Amara looked at the drive, then at him. "Why bring this to me?" "Because Internal Affairs won't touch it," he said. "Because the people who were hurt never got their day in court, and because, after what you did, I figured you might." For the first time that morning, Amara smiled. "Detective Navarro, are you aware that sharing sealed police evidence is a felony?" He nodded. "Yes, Mom." but covering up a crime is worse. She studied him for a long moment, then reached across the desk and slid the drive closer. Then let's make sure it sees the light. Navarro exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for a year. As he turned to leave, Amara added, "Detective, thank you for remembering which side of the law you serve." He paused in the doorway. "I didn't. Not until you reminded me there's still a side worth serving." When the door closed, Amara leaned back in her chair, the drive resting under her palm. Outside, the courthouse bells marked 10 o'clock. Justice, she thought, wasn't a destination. It was a pulse that needed constant checking. That afternoon, she walked the city. No entourage, no cameras. Just a black coat, gloves, and a mind too full to stay still. She passed the diner near Lexington Avenue where she used to grab lunch before hearings. The waitress inside recognized her and raised a hand, hesitant but smiling. Amara nodded back. Farther down, she crossed paths with a group of protesters outside police headquarters. Young, loud, defiant, their signs catching the wind. Accountability isn't revenge. Judges can bleed too. For the first time in weeks, she laughed a soft, disbelieving sound. At the end of the block, she stopped at a newsstand. The front page of the Times showed her portrait beside the headline, "The Woman Who Made the System Listen." The photo was unflattering. The bruise still visible, her expression fierce and unyielding. But it was honest. She bought a copy, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her coat pocket. That evening, she returned to her chambers. The city had turned silver in the streetlights. She powered up her computer and inserted Navarro's drive. The footage loaded a blur of movement, shouting, the echo of boots on tile. But beneath it all was the sound she'd come to recognize better than any, silence where truth should have been. She pressed record on a new document, speaking directly into the microphone. Judicial Memorandum, December 2nd. Initiating review of unreported incidents linked to 11th Precinct operations, 2024-2025. Evidence suggests systemic suppression of misconduct reports. This record will be submitted to the Federal Oversight Bureau under seal. Let the next investigation begin. Her voice didn't waver once. When she finished, she sat back, letting the hum of the city drift through the window. Somewhere below, someone laughed. Somewhere else, a siren cried. The same city, but different now. Awake. Amara whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what justice sounds like, messy, imperfect, but still breathing." And as the night folded over Manhattan, she realized something that made her smile again. She hadn't just survived the system. She had made it listen.